Don't forget to do the Mattermost poll for this. And next, I would like to introduce Warren Kumari, who is representing not his employer, but the work party that was established by ICANN's Security and Stability Advisory Committee to analyse the adoption of open source software in the DNS supply chain. And that is what he's going to talk about now, and not about his lovely hat.
But it's such a nice hat. So yeah, thanks. As Kathy said, I'm going to be talking about open source software and DNS and name registration infrastructure, which feels like an incredibly long title for a fairly short talk. So this is work from the ICANN Security and Stability Advisory Committee. And the important disclosures, as Kathy said, I am presenting this on behalf of the SSAC. I will try and answer questions, but these are just going to be my views. There are a number of people from SSAC in the room, and you can ask them if you can find them. I can't see any of them anymore. Maybe they all left. There's Suzanne somewhere. There we go. And Matt and others. And Marike is also here somewhere. This is still early days, and so this is mostly a heads up to let you all know about this, and also to ask for input and feedback. So, a bunch of times I've said I'm doing this for the ICANN SSAC. I'm going to read this because it comes from the ICANN bylaws, but what is the SSAC? It advises the ICANN community and board on security and integrity matters related to internet naming and address systems. Obviously, you know how to read. You can do that as well. One of the things that it does is ongoing threat assessment and risk analysis to assess principal threats to stability and security of these systems. And part of that is sort of looking at the system as a whole, not just the DNS parts, but sort of how the whole system fits together, and also the sort of ancillary threats, etc. Again, as I said, part of SSAC. And this is specifically an open source work party, which is going to analyze adoption of open source software in the DNS supply chain. And the reason I said the DNS supply chain and not just the DNS is because we're going to focus on recursive and authoritative servers, but also on all of the other stuff that you need to make a naming system work. This includes things like RDAP and WHOIS, EPP and registry backends, escrow functions, all of that sort of other stuff that you need, not just DNS servers. Why are we doing this? Well, we want to make operational reliance on open source infrastructure stuff. My issue is I can't actually read these with my new glasses. Visible in policy discussions. And mostly what we're trying to do is clear up misinformed assumptions by regulators and policymakers that may threaten the development and supply model. Basically, regulators and policymakers don't understand the benefit, scope, and scale of open source in the DNS. An example of this is of the 12 organizations that run root servers, 10 of them do it exclusively with open source for the serving of queries. The remaining 2 use some proprietary stuff and also a bunch of open source. You and I might know that the root's not special, but regulators and policymakers seem to think it is, and they've got no idea about this sort of thing. So we have a timeline for this work party. A few weeks ago, probably 2 or 3 at this point, we sent out email to DNS-OARC and a bunch of other lists with a survey asking people to please fill it in, provide information, etc. At the end of February, we're planning on closing the survey period and then writing a report. And we hope to have the report done by early June, which is when the ICANN 83 meeting comes along. And this report is supposed to inform policymakers and regulators and similar. People in this room are not really the audience, but you are the sort of people who have information that's useful for us to write this report. So why am I telling you this, right? If this report's not aimed at you, why would you care? Why might you want to pay any attention? Well, I'm telling you this because we have a special offer for you. There is a survey. You get to fill in a survey. It's a very nice survey. You can fill it in. More seriously, There is a lot of regulation and legislation that's being proposed, and it's being proposed all over the world in all different countries. We have SSAC people from some set of countries, but most of us don't pay that much attention to upcoming regulation. Hopefully you are, and hopefully you know of some that's coming, which might affect open source. Again, if it happens to be DNS-related open source, that's a plus, but any regulation that affects how open source gets developed, how it gets created, liabilities, all of that sort of stuff. So, as I say, there is a survey there. You can scan it with your phone, you can type in the URL, you could probably decode the QR code by hand, but I would suggest you don't. So, a bunch of times I've said there's regulation and legislation. What the hell am I talking about? Well, here are some examples. This is a tiny sliver of a much larger set, but one of the recent White House executive orders mandated things like government agencies should use encrypted DNS, and there was some discussion on security assessment of free and open source. The URLs are in the slides if you want them later. Don't bother trying to follow that one. It's a whitehouse.gov thing published on January 16th, and if you follow it now, it's a 404, so who knows? But there's other ones. The CISA Secure by Design pledge. CISA had a software security attestation program. In the EU, there's a whole bunch of regulation. Again, these are just tiny slivers of this. There's the market entry requirement, or CRA, NSI2IA, and the EU Product Liability Directive. Again, there are way more. This is just a small subset. UK, of course, has their own set, Code of Practice for Software Vendors, but not all regulation and legislation is bad, right? Like, we automatically kind of assume it probably is. Some of it is not awful. For example, this bottom thing is from the UK Digital Data and Technology Playbook, and it makes a fairly strong case that, software should be open source and designed for access in a platform agnostic way. Seems fairly reasonable probably to most of us. So, much regulation is dangerous and scary, but not all. Some of it might be useful, but if we don't know about it, we can't look at it and comment on it. For more information, you can talk to myself, or Martin, or Raffaele, or Vicky, or Mirake. I updated the slides, but forgot to upload them. Mirake's over there. And questions, comments, etc. As I say, this is early days. There's a survey. You can scan the QR code. You can come up and start asking questions. But please provide feedback. Let us know about other legislation and regulation. We will look at your stuff and hopefully put it in a report. Comments, questions?
Yeah, Alison Mankin from PCH. We have a lot to do with regulators, and I think they are quite a mixed bag about this. Mm-hmm. So it would be great if this report encourages the ones who have mixed groups to help out those who are supporting open source and open source hardware. There's like a lot of open source advocates within the Swiss government, for example. We can probably source some of that information for you, and is careful not to say kind of an us-them approach. Just another point is that, I don't need to make another point because
we've got time, I think.
Don't want to cut into to the lightning talks.
Oh, fair.
Dwayne Wessels from VeriSign. Warren, can you go into a little more detail? Are these sort of regulations about open source in general, or just open source that gets used for like internet infrastructure-y things?
The answer is yes. So we're going to be focusing on DNS types and related domain name stuff. Yeah. And the primary thing is to make regulators and legislators just aware of how much it gets used. So we're focusing on the DNS-y bits because it's where our sort of experience lies, but hopefully it's going to make it clear that open source in general is useful to the internet and it's free, etc. So people should use it instead of I don't actually know if that answered your question or if I answered something else.
No, I understand that SSAC's work is focused on DNS and that kind of thing. I just wondered if the regulations are even, or the proposed regulations are even more broad
God, yes.
than that.
Yeah. Most of the regulation talks about open source in general and how, open source, potentially people are open to liability or not, or that sort of stuff.
Okay.
So most regulation doesn't even mention the DNS. It just happens to be that a lot of DNS software is open source. Okay. So we're not focusing specifically on that. Well, the regulation doesn't focus on that. It focuses on all the open source stuff, and we're going to be like, just so you know, this stuff uses it too, and it makes you money, so please don't cock it up.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Lars Lehmann from NetNode. Thank you for doing this work. I think this is important. I'm one of these people who get snared into dealing with regulations in various incarnations. And having more documentation to point to that is looking at this and trying to convey a message is a good thing, so thank you.
Oh, great, thank you.
And an urge to the rest of you to actually look at this survey.
There's a survey over there. You can fill in the survey. You can also do the polls for DNS-OARC, but this is better and more fun. Oh, I'm so not going to get around to talking about it again.
What I'm actually going to suggest is open the survey. If you haven't got time to do it now, leave it on the last open tab on your browser, next to the one for the OARC, and then you can do it when you get home. America.
Yeah, remote question from Martin Artson from NLNet Labs, who's also leading this work, is it a short or a long survey?
It's a really short survey. Martin made the survey, just so folk know. It's a really short survey, and it's lots of fun, and it's got a bunch of checkboxes, but it's also got text things where you can write as much stuff as you would like. Also, I will point out on this slide, I said that regulation of open source will directly affect you, and I put that in uppercase. If you do not agree with me, you can easily let me know by filling in the survey and telling me that I'm wrong. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Yay.
I think we're done. Please say thank you.